The last transmission from Vecthaler Prime lasted 11 seconds before it cut to static. Archivist speaker Nema Voss stood in the ruins of the Cordant Assembly's central chamber, staring at a screen looping the same 11 seconds over and over. A voice, hoarse and terrified, speaking a Cordant dialect no one had used in official broadcasts for a century. "They're not attacking the fleet," the voice said. "They're attacking the records. Every archive. Every history vault. They're not trying to kill us. They're trying to make sure no one remembers we." Static. Nema had watched the clip 43 times. Vecthaler Prime, home to the largest historical archive in the Cordant Compact, had gone dark 6 hours ago, not destroyed. That would have shown up on long-range sensors as debris, as wreckage, as something. It had simply stopped transmitting, stopped existing in any database that mattered. Archivist speaker. Her aide, a young Thrall boy named Austin, burst through the chamber doors, 3 of his 4 eyes wide with panic. "The Grand Registry. It's gone, all of it. 4,000 years of compact history, wiped in under a minute." "That's not possible," Nema said, though her voice shook. "The registry has redundant backups on 9 separate worlds. 8 of the 9 are already dark," Austin whispered. "The 9th just went silent while I was running here." Nema turned back to the looping transmission, to that terrified voice cut short mid-warning, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Somewhere out past the Compact's eastern border, an entire species that the galaxy had spent 40 years trying to forget was making very sure the galaxy would never get the chance. But this hadn't started with archives burning. It had started, years earlier, with a single act of cruelty the Cordant Compact never expected humanity to survive. 9 years earlier, the human colony of Ashwood Reach had never asked for trouble. 40,000 settlers, 3 generations deep, growing wheat and raising children on a world so unremarkable. The Compact's own maps didn't bother naming its neighboring moons. That was precisely why the Compact's border directorate chose it. An example. Director Kalo Resh explained to his officers, standing on the bridge of his warship as it entered orbit. "The Compact has grown soft on new species. Too many treaties, too much patience for creatures that haven't earned a seat at the table. Ashwood Reach will remind the galaxy what happens to those who forget their place." There was no declaration, no warning, no demand for surrender. Orbital bombardment lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, Ashwood Reach was a scar of glass and ash, and the Compact quietly filed the incident under resource dispute resolution, confident that a colony too small to matter would be forgotten within a decade. They were right about one thing. It was forgotten. By everyone except the survivors. 11,000 people had made it to the underground shelters. Among them, a 19-year-old engineering student named Priya Ose, who spent the following 3 days digging her younger brother out of a collapsed shelter tunnel with her bare hands, only to find him already gone. She didn't cry. Not then. She simply started planning. The Compact assumed silence meant surrender. That assumption would cost them everything. Priya Ose was not by nature a soldier. She had wanted to build bridges, not fleets. But grief has a way of redirecting talent. And within 2 years she had risen through Earth's rebuilding military command, not through ambition. But because she asked the one question no one else was asking, how do you make an enemy afraid of being forgotten, the way they made us afraid of being erased? Earth's response to Ashwood Reach was not immediate. It was patient, almost unnervingly so. While the Compact moved on to other border disputes, humanity spent 9 years doing something no other species in galactic history had attempted. They built an information war machine instead of just a military one. Deep cover analysts. Archive infiltrators. Engineers who specialized not in weapons, but in finding the digital foundations beneath a civilization's memory and learning exactly how to unmake them. You want to erase the Compact's history? General Aldrich Voss, no relation to Nema, though fate would tangle their names together soon enough, had asked Priya during a closed briefing. That's not a war strategy. That's obsession. They tried to erase 40,000 people and call it a footnote, Priya said quietly. I want them to understand permanently what it feels like to not be allowed to exist. What General Voss didn't know, what almost no one in that room knew, was that Priya had already identified her first target, and it wasn't a military installation. The Compact's Grand Registry was by design nearly impossible to destroy. 9 redundant archive worlds, each holding a complete copy of Compact history, law, treaties, and cultural record, cross-verified every cycle to prevent tampering. It took Priya's team 6 years to map every redundancy. It took them another 18 months to build the tools required to breach all 9 simultaneously. If we do this, her second-in-command, a quiet Kesseran defector named Thal Amri, warned her, "There's no walking it back. Species that lose their recorded history don't just lose data, they lose their sense of who they are. You'd be doing to them exactly what Ashwood Reach did to us." Priya was silent for a long moment. "No," she finally said. "Ashwood Reach killed 40,000 people who never got the chance to grow old. I'm not killing anyone. I'm making sure the next generation of compact leadership grows up without the luxury of forgetting what their ancestors did." That distinction would matter more than either of them realized. Because humanity's plan had one crucial flaw neither Priya nor Thal had anticipated. The strike came on the anniversary of Ashwood Reach's destruction. Though only a handful of people in compact space would ever learn that detail, 9 archive worlds, breached within the same 90-second window by human infiltration teams who had spent years building false identities inside compact infrastructure. Not soldiers storming gates, technicians quietly copying, encrypting, and then deleting, world by world, everything the compact had ever written about itself. Nema Voss, half a galaxy away in the Cordant assembly chamber, watched her civilization's memory disappear in real time, and had no idea that the operations architect and the general overseeing Earth's broader campaign happened to share her family's name by pure, meaningless coincidence, a detail that would cause chaos in compact intelligence briefings for months. As analysts wasted precious weeks convinced Voss was some singular human mastermind rather than 2 unconnected people on opposite sides of the war, the compact had made a terrible mistake underestimating how thoroughly humanity had studied them. But humanity was about to learn they hadn't studied thoroughly enough. Deep in the 9th Archive World's central vault, a young records keeper named Asen, the same nervous thrall boy who would later serve Nema as an aide, was working a night shift no one expected him to survive. When the human infiltration team's deletion protocol reached his sector, Asen did something reckless. He physically disconnected the primary data core from the network, isolating one small fragment of the Grand Registry before the wipe could reach it. Not military secrets, not weapons data, but something stranger. 7 centuries of compact children's stories, songs, and oral histories, the parts of a civilization too unimportant to be prioritized by either side. He was caught. A human operative named Reyes found him crouched over the isolated core, shaking, expecting execution. Reyes stared at the boy for a long moment, then at the fragment he'd saved. Everything changed in the next few seconds, because Reyes made a choice that wasn't in Priya's plan at all. "Leave it," Reyes said quietly, lowering her weapon. "Take it and run." When Priya learned what had happened, she didn't order Reyes disciplined. She sat with the report for 3 days. "We were supposed to erase them completely," Thal reminded her. "One archivist let a piece of their history survive. That could unravel the entire operation's message." "Maybe," Priya said. "Or maybe it proves the point better than total erasure ever could." She called a ceasefire on the 10th Archive raid, the one targeting cultural sites, folk records, and children's education systems, overriding her own original battle plan. "We're not the compact," she told her command staff. "We don't destroy people to make an example. We're showing them what erasure costs, so they never inflict it on anyone else again. That lesson doesn't need to include the songs their children grew up singing." The Council of Compact Worlds, expecting total annihilation of their history, had made a terrible assumption about what kind of enemy they were facing, and it was about to cost them a war they thought they'd already lost. 6 months later, Nema Voss stood before an emergency session of what remained of the Cordant Assembly, holding a data core that had been quietly returned to compact space through neutral diplomatic channels, along with a message. "They didn't have to give this back," she told the assembled delegates, voice unsteady. "They erased our laws, our treaties, our military records, everything Director Resch's administration used to justify what happened to a human colony none of us had ever heard of. But they left us our stories, our children's stories." Director Resch, stripped of rank and standing trial for the Ashwood Reach bombardment under a legal framework the compact had to entirely rebuild from human-supplied historical fragments, said nothing. "Humanity didn't erase us," Nema continued. "They erased the version of us that thought we could bomb a colony and call it a footnote. What's left is on us to decide what we build next." Light years away, Priya Ose stood in a memorial garden on the rebuilt soil of Ashwood Reach, reading a letter Asen had sent her, shaky handwriting, translated twice over, thanking a species he'd been taught to fear for the one thing they hadn't taken. She thought of her brother, Of 11,000 survivors who had spent 9 years being told their grief was too small to matter to the wider galaxy. We didn't erase them, she said softly, to no one but the wind moving through new wheat. We just made sure they'd never be able to erase anyone again. The wheat kept growing, patient and unbothered, the way it always had before the bombs, and the way it always would after. Some histories are worth burning down. Some are worth planting instead.